Hey, Mike.
Hi, Caleb. How are you?
I'm doing well. We've got a special recording night because of some big news.
Yeah. Well, I mean, special recording night or a delayed recording night, I guess, depending on how you want to frame it.
Yeah, I think delayed is true. Also, definitely
Yeah.
factually accurate. We decided to delay. We were expecting that Elon would post the master plan he'd been teasing last week on Sunday, since he was
He wasn't
tweeting about it.
teasing. He said that it would be out.
He said he hoped to get it out this week,
Oh, come
which
on.
was last week.
You're being very generous.
I'm just telling you what he said, and then
You're really buying this whole dog ate my homework excuse. I need an extension teacher, please,
yeah,
please.
and then he used SpaceX launch as an excuse.
I mean, we've all been there, right?
All been there. I just launched a rocket. I'm kind of busy. I can't finish. And then yesterday, he was flying back in his private plane and working on it there. And then he said, "I'm going to stay up all night and work on it and pull an all-nighter." And then he had lots of crazy tweets this morning about listening to The Great Gatsby soundtrack and doing illicit drugs, which was a joke. I'm pretty confident it's a joke. So it finally dropped at around 6 o'clock or so Pacific, maybe a little earlier. And yeah, it's Master Plan Part Deux. Duh.
So we're to understand that he flew back across the country instead of autopiloting in a Tesla using the network of supercharging stations?
I think so. We know he has a private jet, and I don't think he could have driven that quickly. So
He didn't dog food his way across the country?
not this time. I think his
Noted.
time. Yes. So
So I guess maybe you can catch us up on, in case we don't know, what is part one of this master plan, since I'm assuming that there is a part one, since this is part two and we don't have sort of a Leonard part 6 situation here going on, that there was a precursor to this.
Yep, and like most sequels, the first one was not named Part One. It was just the master plan. He wrote the blog post 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago, outlining what Tesla's vision was and what they were going to do.
Wow, this is in a pre-iPhone world.
It was, yeah, 2006. So the general outline, which he also reviewed in his post today, was first create the Roadster, the low-volume, high-price car, then use that money to develop what became the Model S, and then use that money to develop and unveil and launch what we now know as the Model 3. The Model X was sort of randomly thrown in there. And then also he had a note in the original post about wanting sustainable energy generation, so solar generation. But they didn't actually do that themselves. Yeah, they did pretty good on that general plan 10 years later.
So does including the Model X count as a bonus or a like a demerit? Is that a deviation from the master plan? That is... where does that fit in?
I would characterize that as an audible.
Apparently, we're scoring the part one of the master plan. I guess that's implicit in revealing part two, is that we have to look back and grade him on part one.
Yeah, I would call it an extra. They didn't, but they missed on the solar energy.
Okay.
And so they're trying to correct for that now. And we'll talk about that more. But I think they certainly released the Roadster. They certainly released the Model 3 or the Model S. And they went on a little detour with the X. And the Model 3 is, should be pencils down design, should be starting final production processes and everything now. So
was disappearing all the Roadsters part of the master plan, or is that just something that happened?
Well, when you only sold 4,500 of them, it's going to be hard to find. But
I see.
I think they're in garages.
We'll save that for a future episode.
Yeah. So I think they did pretty well, and the goal.
Pretty well. Is that an A, a B, a B plus? Where would you grade them?
I mean, I think for a startup to predict 10 years in advance, like lay out their 10-year plan and basically hit those product milestones, I would give them an A for startup success. Yeah.
All right.
I would. Yeah, I definitely do, because they didn't do anything else that random, and they've done what they need to do to hit those. It was pretty clear 10 years ago to them, at least, what they wanted to do. And that's a long time. I mean, it's obviously a car company has different time horizons, but yeah, I think they've done pretty well there. So that's what sort of is leaving the opportunity for this post. I don't think it wasn't widely expected. There wasn't much. There weren't people talking about, well, when are they going to talk about their next future plan? I think it was a surprise, certainly for me, when last week he was saying he was going to post a part 2 of the master plan, and I think we teased a little bit about what we thought would be in it last week in the last episode. So they certainly weren't under any obligation to do it, but I think
they did set a deadline, and then that deadline slipped.
That's also classic Tesla. So
should we read anything into that?
No, I don't. I think it seems like he likes operating with deadlines looming. It definitely seems to be a motivating factor and process for him, is to set deadlines, and very aggressive deadlines. And, because he clearly was not done writing. Like, I think many companies would not announce something until it's pretty much done, and then have that week to polish it and finish it and basically be able to publish it whenever. It doesn't seem like Elon follows that general practice. He tends to get an idea and want to talk about it as soon as he can. And it doesn't sound like he had that much of it written. He probably had a lot of it thought out and was having a hard time finding the time to actually put pen to paper.
Do you think that
key to keyboard?
Do you think it was actually him having needing the extra time to actually write it, or as a public company, was it that it needed to be vetted and approved as forward-looking statements or whatever the official terminology would be, that you can't just have a CEO spouting off about what the next 5 to 10 years of a company will be?
Honestly, and this is just my best guess, I think he was actually still writing it. Because I don't think many people were up with him last night at 1 or 2 a.m. working with him on it. And I think that my bet is that he finished it today in the morning when he posted that tweet about it being ready at around 5 p.m. And then it went to the lawyers and other people in the company for final red line and tweaking. But I think this is him deciding what he wants to talk about publicly. I think he pretty clearly runs the show. We don't really know of any other major characters in the Tesla company who are empowered to make such decisions.
We need a mole inside of Tesla. Can we somehow
we do need a
cultivate
tipster. Hopefully there must be some listening, some people inside the company. So we'd love tipster tips.
Yeah. I don't know what the benefit
tips
to the mole would be, but to us it would be great. So if you're so inclined, hit us up and give us the inside scoop.
Yeah, did this circulate hours before it was posted or days before?
Is he just distilling feedback? Is he just distilling and putting public face on stuff that's already been discussed internally? I'm hoping that this wasn't a surprise for anyone in the company. That would, I know if I was working there and stuff came out through Twitter that was surprising, that would be a little bit disconcerting.
Yeah, it's like Steve Jobs apparently on stage when he talked about FaceTime for the first time and said, we're going to open source it. Apparently no one inside Apple had ever heard that before. So
One more thing.
So let's jump into it.
Yeah.
So the first thing he talks about in the post, and I'll say he, since he did pen it, and I think it's signed by him, is the idea around integrated energy generation and storage. So this is talking about, we kind of messed up by not making Solar City part of Tesla. We should have had those be the same company early on, and just by sort of chance of the way they were founded and history, they should have been the same company since we had very similar goals. I basically, as Elon Musk, wanted to do solar power anyways, and I should have just put them inside the same company. And the big reason we want to do that is we think there's going to be a really beautiful solar panel for your roof and an integrated battery so that you don't have to be connected to the power grid, and it's all seamless and integrated and simple. So we're going to make a product that brings all that together. So if you're a homeowner, you can come to Tesla and get a way to detach from the grid. So this one I think is pretty clear. I mean, they'd already been talking about this with announcing the Solar City acquisition.
Right.
So this one doesn't seem that unusual.
Especially since they're selling the power
walls.
Power
Yeah.
wall. I was going to say power pack, but power wall.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned they're ready to scale the Powerwall, and that Solar City has really good new solar panels for homes that look good. So I'm really curious to see what those look like. I do find it a little curious how many of these homes will be able to generate enough energy to power and charge their Tesla during the day if you're not at home. Because most of the Powerwalls are like 7 or 10 kilowatt hours, so pretty small relative to what's inside the cars. Like 10 times smaller.
Currently.
So I'm not, currently. So I think that'll be really interesting. I have to imagine they're going to be building the system in the context of you having a Tesla, so a Tesla car. But this one isn't that interesting to me beyond like, in terms of newsworthiness.
Right.
That's my current sort of what is revealed in this part 2 that we didn't know about, or is kind of an interesting new insight into how and where Tesla's going. This was already telegraphed pretty clearly with Solar City, and he talked about it on the conference call. So this one, not that interested in newsworthy wise, but I'm still excited for it.
That was point 1 of Master Plan Part 2.
Part 1, yeah. So part 2 is where it starts to get really interesting.
Well, bullet point 2.
Bullet point 2,
not
yes.
part 2.
Yes. Part 2, subpart 1. Part 2 of part 2 is expand to cover the major forms of terrestrial transport. So first off, terrestrial, that's very specific.
Transport, yes. That is a wonderful phrase.
So, this is coming from the spaceman Elon Musk. Terrestrial is the definition here. There's already been rumors of airplanes and others, he does rockets, which is a form of transport. So terrestrial transport.
Yeah, but do you think I would include airplanes and any sort of flying stuff as terrestrial as well?
No,
because you're moving from point A to point B on the Earth versus like going from the Earth to somewhere else.
No, I think.
Am I reading too much into that?
I think so. I think the air transport is for part 3. 10
Trois.
years.
You got to roll your R. Trois.
All
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what he talks about here is right now we sort of cover premium sedans and SUVs. So Model S and Model X. Conspicuously absent is the Roadster, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then with the Model 3, which is coming, so we already know that's coming, a future compact SUV, which has been teased already as the future car, the SUV, the Model Y, which will be the Model 3 variation. So we kind of knew about that. And then a new kind of pickup truck. So this is the first official time they've talked about a pickup truck as part of their product line. Elon Musk, in multiple times over the past 5 or 6 years, has hinted that he thinks making a pickup truck could be interesting, that when he's driven an F-350 before with nothing in it, it was a terrible ride, and that you could do really interesting things with air suspension, which Model S's and X's have, in terms of making sure that the load is distributed well. And he also thought that, obviously electric motors have incredible amounts of torque, which is really important when you're moving heavy loads. So a pickup truck is something that will address most of the consumer market. So the Model 3, a compact SUV, and a pickup truck to address most of the consumer market. And that they don't think they need to do a platform much cheaper than Model 3 because of a future part of car sharing.
Right. Oh, you're jumping ahead.
Yeah, but basically not going to be making cars as cheap as a Honda Fit or a Yaris or, $10,000 or $20,000 cars. It sounds like they're currently not going to do a car like a Model 4 or something that's going to be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, they're setting the floor there. They're not going any lower than the Model 3.
Which I think that is new, because he has talked about a Gen 4 platform already that would be less expensive. So that either means they're planning to scrap that, or that will just roll into the Model 3. And I think what's also kind of interesting is This really reminds me of the Apple product line, 2x2, that Steve Jobs announced when he came back. Of we're going to have a consumer laptop, a pro laptop, a consumer desktop, and a pro desktop. We're going to have a premium sedan and a consumer level lower cost sedan. We're going to have a premium SUV and a lower cost SUV. And oh, by the way, we're also going to have a truck. Since pickup trucks are the best-selling vehicle class in the United States. But that seems good. I mean, on the pickup truck, I don't know. What do you think they could do there? You said they wanted to do it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you start getting into like full-on SUVs and especially pickup trucks, there's a lot of vehicle-related reasons as to why those are so popular, because they are considered commercial vehicles, so they're exempted from lots of mileage guidelines or even crash safety. There's all sorts of exemptions that the car companies get away with by selling these things because they're not considered cars; they're considered commercial vehicles, even though it's just someone just an average person driving it.
Right.
So there's a whole other set of external, unrelated things that go into why they look the way they look and why they're as big as they are, and why they're as popular as they are.
But Tesla doesn't care about those factors, do they?
Well, if they're entering that market, they're going to have to compete with Ford and Chevy and Dodge making those trucks, and kind of they've been milking that teat for a very long time, and they're very, very good at it.
Yeah, but like that's the most profitable sector. That's why they spend so much. The American car makers spend so much time there. Is that there's lots of profit in making pickup trucks and SUVs.
Right, and there is a lot of profit because they've let's say suggested and coerced the laws and tariffs and everything into being where they are, where it becomes this honeypot for development, which, it's kind of an aside, but it's just the first thing that sprung to mind when I was reading that was that, you're getting into the sort of well-cultivated bread and butter of the American car companies right there.
I mean, I think the smaller compact SUV is going to be incredibly popular, especially because the people buying Teslas still are going to be slightly more affluent, especially in this class. Like I think the X5 and the Q5 are better selling than the sedan versions in the US, at least. So, the US loves SUVs, and small SUVs are incredibly popular. Sort of the crossover SUV category is incredibly popular. So I think that's going to be an incredibly popular car. I think we'll see people lining up to order that, just like we did with the Model 3. The pickup truck, I'm more dubious about its prospects. I know that the market is huge, but I think range is clearly really important there, the durability of it. And I think that I just feel like because a lot of pickup trucks are used for more commercial and sort of semi-commercial, semi-amateur kind of stuff, that I just don't know if the crossover of customer segment is the same, that the people who want pickup trucks are also currently following Tesla to the same degree that people who want premium sedans are. But
I suppose
we'll see.
They could figure out what drives that market and kind of introduce a premium product along whatever those different axes are. It's probably not going to be sleekness and whatnot, but it could be range and torque and whatever I guess if you ever watch any sports on television, especially football, you see you're exposed to hours of truck commercials. So you can kind of infer what that market wants based on what those advertisers are targeting.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the driving characteristics of it are going to be incredible with the low battery pack. And also they say a new kind of pickup truck. So I'm curious, do you think this is going to be like, what was it called? Like the Baja? Like
it's going to be an El Camino.
Yeah, they're like semi-car pickup truck things. Those did not do very well.
The Chevy El Camino, or maybe the Model 3 will become a Subaru Brat.
Yeah, the Brat was crazy. I don't know.
Brat was the one that had the seats in the back facing backwards with those little like ski pole grips.
That was super bright colors. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I'm not as well educated on the pickup truck market as I am on the
We're clearly both
sedan.
Out of our element here. Yeah.
So I will move on from that. And I'm curious what listeners think about their interest in a Tesla pickup truck, and if it fits any of their desires.
Yeah, if you're in pickup country, please let us know how you think Tesla could penetrate pickup land.
But I think what's interesting here is that it seems likely that the S will be a car that continues, the X will be a model that continues, the 3, the Y, and then maybe P for pickup, whatever. That that those will just sort of be perpetual product lines, similar to like the MacBook, MacBook Pro, iPhone, sort of just perpetually improved. Very different than the traditional car manufacturer's model of proliferating their product line with every variation between A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6 on the Audi world, and the 3 Series, 4 Series, 5 Series, 6 Series, 7 Series, 8 Series. It sounds like they're going to keep it sort of similar and tied down. I think that's sort of I wasn't sure how they were going to deal with product line sort of extension, and it sounds like they have a pretty closed down set. Like, it's curious to whether or not there's going to be a Model 3 that has a hatchback version or a 2-door or a convertible. Like, we haven't seen that yet with the S.
Oh, a station wagon Model 3. I might buy that.
So yeah, I'm curious if they're going to do those sub product lines. So that's yet to be seen.
I think the compact like SUV crossover vehicles have sort of eaten the station wagon market.
Yeah,
so that
definitely.
seems like there would be a lot of there would be a lot of overlap there.
And they say most of the consumer market. So, I mean, maybe they're going to be okay. Like, maybe the convertible is just the Roadster. Because I do think they've already talked about doing a new Roadster. So I think the Roadster will be based off the Model 3 platform, and the pickup truck may be on the Model 3 platform, maybe on the S platform, not sure. So that'll be interesting.
Okay, so that's the consumer market. And then
yes.
They mentioned going outside of the consumer market in this same bullet point, right?
Yeah, they then talked about the factory stuff, but we can get back to that. But the other cars they talked about and the other vehicles they talked about in the post were a semi-truck and a new type of urban transport to compete with buses. And the buses one he had talked about, and maybe we talked about a teeny bit, where he was talking at the one of the international conferences maybe a few months ago, definitely when we were doing the show, about we have some interesting ideas about a new bus, so like a new take on a bus. So he's revealed that here, and we'll talk about that. And I think the Semi is certainly more clear. So and they already named it. It's like, we believe the Tesla Semi will deliver a substantial reduction in the cost of cargo, increase safety, and make it really fun to operate.
The fun to operate seemed a little weird, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, not sure. I guess it has to, I don't know, something around the autopilot, driver fatigue. Yeah, I think.
Are you going to be able to install games on it or something and kind of fill your time and play Words with Friends as you're trucking across the country?
Yeah, I don't think it has to do with that level of fun. I think I think it must be something more around not being as difficult to operate or tricky or just like more.
I guess fun for whom?
Quick.
Once we know fun
I think for the
whom,
driver.
Yeah. Is it the driver or the owner? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because there is the owner. I mean, maybe. So interesting stuff here, right? The only major semi-truck manufacturer that also does consumer cars is Volvo, and they're one of the smallest market share. There's like Freight.
If I'm not mistaken, if I'm not mistaken, they're actually separate companies. Like they're owned by different parent companies. The Volvo Trucks was sold off, I believe, some point in the last decade or two to someone else, and I think they're either one of them separate and one of them's owned by Ford or something. I'm getting out of my depth, but they're no longer the same.
Yeah, there's them. There's Peterbilt, which is sort of small. There's Mack Truck. There's International, and then there's Freightliner. Freightliner, yeah.
And then Mercedes, I think, has Daimler.
Mercedes has some trucks, but they don't even really show up in the U.S. on the top one. So there's like about 2 million or so. I did just a quick check, like 2 million registered in the U.S. There's
Peterbilt.
3 times.
Did we say Peterbilt?
Peterbilt also, yeah. There's 3 times as many trailers registered. So there's 3 trailers for every semi-tractor. So they're tractors and trailers. So they're tractor trailers. and then the semi is just sort of this new abbreviation we have for them. So they're like manufactured completely differently. They're sold very differently. The people who own them oftentimes are not the ones operating them. It's a commercial purchase. It's a capital purchase. It's intended to be, thought of as a capital expense, and totally different than the consumer market. So I think one thing is they have to announce this in advance because it's going to be a totally different manufacturing process and also a different team. So they're going to need to go start hiring people from these semi-truck manufacturing and production companies. And you need to be able to tell people what you're doing there, and it's clearly going to leak if you're doing it. So I think that's a big reason to talk about it. But more interestingly, that they want to go into this market really, of all the automotive issues you have to do and all the other things that are about to come in this part 2 post, doing semi trucks is like that. It's a ton of miles, as we found out about in researching usage of miles on highways. But this one is the one that I think might be the biggest flop of all of them.
It's a completely different type of vehicle too. It's not a unibody vehicle like a passenger vehicle would be. It's like a chassis. It's an old school chassis vehicle with. They're tractors. They're called tractor trailers because it's literally a tractor. It's just a big old engine stuck to a chassis and with a hitch on it, and possibly if it's a long haul vehicle, they'll have some living quarters in there as well. So it's kind of like a RV like bolted onto it. But yeah, it seems very, very orthogonal to what they're working on.
And they're extremely expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I think certainly the physics of it can work with having the battery in the trailers and some in the actual tractor. The motors could obviously be large enough. So I don't think there's any issues there. And obviously the cost of ownership of not having to pay for fuel, like hugely inefficient miles per gallon wise. But charging infrastructure, obviously you're going to have to figure out a slightly different place for superchargers. Like no supercharger right now could accommodate a tractor trailer.
So do we know if did it specifically say that these would be battery powered electric vehicles, or is it just Tesla Semi where it could actually be that they're putting their autopilot technology into a partnered vehicle with a Peterbilt or Freightliner or whoever, and just using the computerized AI driving to essentially remove the need for human drivers and being able to operate more efficiently the current existing vehicles.
Oh, the post says there are 2 other type of electric vehicles needed. So it's clearly electric vehicles. Yeah. So this is the one I think is most curious of everything in the post. The Semi is the one I was least expecting and had not heard them talk about ever before, and the one that I think if push came to shove, you would not do. But it sounds like they plan to unveil both of them next year. So
is this just
we'll
Tesla's?
See.
Is this just Tesla's equivalent of the concept car that you see every year from all the traditional auto manufacturers? That's this futuristic looking amazing vehicle that never actually arrives.
I just feel like this one is so much more important that business, like trucking companies want. Like if they haven't proven that trucking companies want the benefits of what a Tesla Semi is going to provide, I would be really disappointed. That would be a big mistake. Like the same way that with PowerPack and Powerwall and all that they've done with, they've gone to utilities and found out if there's demand. I have to believe if they're really doing this, they have to know that there's actually demand, because those people are not going to buy these trucks just because they feel like they want to have it, the same way the consumer market could have a small percentage of people who want them. Like you're not going to buy one of these unless there's an economic benefit to it. And I think there could be, certainly, considering how fuel inefficient these trucks are, and they talk about it, that it reduce the cost of cargo. So I think there's an economic incentive there. I just don't know if Yeah, it's just going to be really interesting. Like, are they going to, where are they going to sell them? They can't put a semi inside of the Tesla. I mean, you're not going to have a truck buyer going into the Stanford shopping center next to the Apple store to buy a semi. So it's going to be this sort of B2B environment. And they're doing it with the utilities. So they clearly have the appetite to do B2B.
I
So
imagine
we'll see.
if you start working with the largest trucking companies, though, you can probably cover a pretty big amount of the market.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think you probably can get pretty fast penetration if it actually is successful. So I think,
I did
I'm really
learn
curious what it is. I'm really curious to see what it is.
When we went on a Caribbean cruise recently, I did learn that the cruise ship that we were on, which is these absolutely enormous things, was actually powered by electric motors. The electric motors were actually directly turning the propellers, and then they were powered by diesel generators that were generating the power for it. So, that is a pretty large vehicle doing long haul stuff, and if battery technology catches up, then it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly plenty of space in those trailers for battery, and
At the expense of your cargo weight, though. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess they certainly do have cargo weight limits. That's going to be interesting. So that one I definitely want to dig in deeper on the semi market, because I had no expectation that the Tesla Show podcast would have to deal with semi trucks. So that'll be
All
fun.
right, so we'll put a pin in that for a future
Put a pin in that one.
So let's go back to the bus.
The bus. So first
The
off,
high passenger density urban transport.
exactly. It is not a bus. Don't call it a bus. Don't call it a comeback. This is going to be something unlike a bus, and it will replace the job of a bus, but it is not a bus.
It sounded like when he was describing everyone, like no center aisle so that everyone can get in and out. It sounded kind of like we just finished watching Downton Abbey, and Downton Abbey has the train station coming into Yorkshire or wherever they are, and all of the first class people like immediately, like every cabin opens right out to the platform, and so there's no
Like a
center.
stagecoach.
Yeah, exactly. So every single person. I mean, that's kind of a random. Apologies for the random reference.
And the spoiler.
Oh, well, the trains come to Downton Abbey is not really a huge spoiler, but
All right.
Anyways, I won't give any secrets away about what happens to Lady Edith or anyone. But yeah, that seemed interesting. It sounded like he was talking about something where like everyone has their own door or something. That seems like that would be a strange. That would introduce a lot of things that could break.
Well, and putting seats where there are entryways. This sounds like it's going to be a pod, a coalition of pods, a connection of pods.
It'd be like a capsule hotel. You just kind
I
of get
think
into
so.
your little pod and take a nap while you zip around town.
Yeah, I think it will be lots of little, so similar to the way that like a monorail is a combination of lots of different trains connected. Like I think there'll be tiny little pods that, because he also talks about like not being too massive like in weight, and also being able to have similar acceleration and deceleration characteristics of traditional vehicles.
Right.
So I'm expecting these are going to be more like little 2 or 3 wheeled sort of things that draft with each other, and that the bus driver, he says, moves to the role of fleet manager. And so a driver leading the pack will be responsible for sort of maintaining and having all these little pods move-ins.
I didn't understand that at all. Yeah.
So some sort of pod structure thing. And then because the other thing is, it said it will take you to your final destination. So that means they must be able to break away and take me to the final place I want to go, which is not a bus stop, but to my office, and then rejoin the pack like a peloton of bicycles. So
Or an Uber pool where you're just dropping everyone off.
right, yeah. Or they're going to move on their own little sequence, and they can rejoin with others when possible. So this sounds maybe just like the little Google bus, but I don't think they're just tiny cars, because it seems like there's some structure to it.
So we might have an episode on that one too. There's a lot to dig into there.
Well, and that they're going to unveil this one next year, So in 2017, we've got, between 6 and 18 months before we see that, if they're on track, and that they're already working on it. Like, obviously they're already working on it.
Yeah, but that could mean they've hired an artist to kind of make some renderings or something. I mean, he wasn't very specific about what working on it means.
Yeah, ready for unveiling next year. So, I mean, they haven't unveiled any vehicles that were just paper. So, I don't know. That one also is interesting. It's been talked about and hinted at, so it's not totally unknown to people who've been following Tesla, probably people listening to the show. But that they want to do it, they see a business opportunity for it. They have concrete plans. It's not just Elon speculating about how it could work. This one is really intriguing because how much of a bus is it? How much of a public service is this? Are the city planners who buy buses going to buy this, or is this something Tesla's going to operate? This one's really fascinating. Is it going to be in like a couple pilot cities and we'll never see it in most places? This one's really fascinating.
Is it something that would even exist prior to full autonomy too? Like, is this something that's predicated upon being able to drive itself around?
Or in cities where it's allowed, and they're getting special permission, or they map it really deeply. Not clear. One funny thing is they said, they're going to put little buttons at bus stops so you can summon it. So it also seems like it's not on a fixed route. That implies
that was an oddly specific little detail too.
Yeah, who don't have a phone, so that you'd summon it similar to an Uber or Lyft. If you have a phone and smartphone, but if you don't, there would still be sort of these skeuomorphic summon buttons like the Amazon Dash. You just click the button and it comes.
I push the Tesla button.
Right, which also sort of implies that you're not waiting for the bus to come at some scheduled interval. It's going to come at a interval of your choosing.
Right, so it's more on demand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it has to be something around, and I'm making these predictions on the fly, of a roaming set of these moving together, and for some amount of range across the normal loop around the city, they're going to break off and then return into the center bus lane because they're taking advantage of cities' bus lanes already. And then they'll break off to take you to your final destination. And the central hub will have the really big battery packs, but they will be able to operate autonomously or semi-autonomously with the bus driver managing it to make sure it doesn't get into trouble as it does its pickup and drop off. But the majority of the miles will try to be driven in this core loop. So it won't be as efficient as point to point, but beginning pickup and ending pickup will be your own little pod, and then you'll be in the group. That's my belief of how this is going to work.
All right. So let's move on to point 3 here. What was the third part of Master Plan Part 2?
Well, one last thing on the automotive side was going deeper on the production improvements. So how a lot of Tesla engineering now is focused extremely heavily on designing the machine that makes the machine. So making the factory its own product that engineering is focused on improving. And Elon talked about this a lot at the last shareholder meeting, that he's really sort of gotten really fascinated by trying to improve the efficiency and density and just overall speed of manufacturing, that most car manufacturing systems are extremely slow. They use a very tiny percentage of the volumetric space of car plants, and that he sees that as a really big opportunity. And so this is the first time he's really laid that out in print, and that they expect a 5 to 10-fold improvement is achievable. But he lays it out is achievable by version 3 of this product of the factory on a roughly 2-year iteration cycle, which would imply 6 years from 2018.
What version does he consider them to be on right now?
He thinks the first version of Model 3 factory production would be 0.5.
So we're not even at 1.0 here.
We're not even at 1. So the sort of second iteration of, by 2018, Model 3 production will be in version 1. So then 6 years from 2018 would be 2022, a 5 to 10-fold improvement, which would both allow them to produce a metric ton load more cars per factory and also reduce the cost of the manufacturing, which is a very large percentage of costs for cars, and should also improve the quality of them. So This one's really exciting to see, and I think we'll get lots of good leaks about it because the production is kind of hard to hide, and people get tours of the factory. And this is one that certainly has not been challenged. I mean, you don't hear anyone else coming out and saying that they think car manufacturing could be done 10 times more efficiently than it is today, except for Tesla. So,
well, Silicon Valley loves to 10x everything, so
they do. He did hedge it a little bit by saying 5x. So, but
I think it's interesting that Elon Musk has been in the news this past year, or in the past year or so, sounding the alarm about super intelligent AI, and now he's talking about machines that make machines. And we all know that's the first path towards Skynet. Once it starts being able to make itself and improve itself, maybe he knows something.
Well, and the next thing he talks about is autonomy.
That's right. Oh, jumping ahead now. Let's go to part 3.
Part 3 of part 2, autonomy. Okay, part 3 of part 2. This one, I think, is certainly people knew this was coming. I don't think anyone expected Tesla to stop at autopilot. I think it was pretty clear.
This seems like the least surprising of all of them.
Yeah, that they are going to go to pushing for full autonomy. I think the interesting bit here is some new data points around their expectations about how that will happen. Because we've talked in the past that the hardware will be here sooner than software, and Elon reiterates that. So he says it's important to emphasize the refinements and validation of the software will take much longer than putting in place the cameras, radar, sonar, and computing hardware. Their goal is for it to be far better than average human driver. They think it needs to be around 10 times better. 10x, another one. And that they need to get to 6 billion miles of self-driving before regulatory approval would happen. And right now they're adding about 3 million miles a day. So they're adding about 1 billion miles a year with the current fleet. The Model 3 will probably quadruple or quintuple that. So they may be able to get to 5 billion miles in a year if Model 3 has the hardware suite to allow autonomy. So he doesn't say it here. I think that would have been nice. He does say that all future Tesla vehicles will eventually have the hardware to be fully self-driving, which would imply the buses and the semis. But he doesn't say the Model 3 will have it at launch. They just say that as technology matures, they'll eventually all have it. So nothing super interesting here beyond that they have that ambition, but I think we already knew that.
I thought he talked a little bit about fail operational, or I'm assuming that means like some sort of failover capacity where, and I think they say any given system could break and your car can still drive. That's interesting. And it doesn't, as far as I know, that's not something that's in there right now. I don't think there's any redundancy. No. Okay. So that's something that's more aspirational or upcoming.
Yeah, that's new. He's mentioned that he thought that was going to be important that they have redundancy of the major systems. And I think it's just I'm not sure if it's actually a already defined term of fail operational compared to fail safe. Because fail safe is then fail into a safe mode, but fail operational, or like operational and then normal and then operational, not sure if that's actually a material difference between a fail-safe model. But it sounds like they certainly he didn't talk about like redundant steering column or redundant acceleration or anything. He really only talked about the computer systems and sensing systems. And does that mean there'll be double all of them, or that the two systems, one of the systems can fail and then the radar will pick up for the sonar, or the camera will pick up for the radar? Or will there be 2 radars and 2 cameras and 2 sonar for every one that are needed?
Yeah, and are they like next to each other, or does that mean they're separated significantly? So if there's damage to the vehicle, one of them you'll minimize the chance of both of them being taken out? I don't know. Yeah,
that'll be... The good thing is that it will be baked into the cars, and we'll see that as soon as it happens. So I'm still holding out hope that the Model 3 will have the new sensor suite. If the first version doesn't have it, then certainly eventual models will. But at launch, the question is, will it have more sensors than are currently on Model S and Model X? That's the question.
And will someone do a teardown to actually find this out?
Well, will they announce it at the part 2 unveiling? That we're going to have a new autopilot hardware suite. It's coming to Model 3, and oh, by the way, it's now shipping on Tesla's S and X already. That
Everybody
may be
look
how it
under your
happens.
seat. You have one here.
Yeah, you have the key to a new Model S.
You get an autopilot, and you get an autopilot.
That they would need a lot more cash. Investors would not be happy with that gift.
I thought the thing that really stuck out for me here in this section was I don't know how much of this is kind of going on the offensive here, but talking about how this sort of moral responsibility that he says it would therefore be morally reprehensible to delay release simply for fear of bad press or some mercantile calculation of legal liability. Talking about autopilot systems and self-driving cars. I thought that was pretty interesting that he's in here and in another part too was kind of laying it out as like, it's not dangerous to be putting autopilot out there. It's actually dangerous to not be doing it. And I thought that was sort of a very political sort of reframing of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've been getting, in light of the fatality, many organizations coming and saying they should pull it. And there was some question how much they would, to try and quell fears and stop the bad press cycle, relent on some of the features of autopilot. And I think this is a very clear declaration that in Tesla's view and Elon Musk's view, they are currently being misunderstood, but they're okay being misunderstood because they are quite confident that it is safer. They believe the data will bear that out, that the regulators will believe that and find that to be true as well, and that they are positioning, like you said, as a moral hazard if they don't release autopilot and keep autopilot out there, that they'd be doing harm to their customers if they don't allow it. And, Elon had been tweeting things of surveys they're doing and that 0.0% of people who are customers want to pull autopilot, that it's just the media being misinformed, as we talked about last week. So, definitely no backpedaling on autopilot, and also a reaffirmation that autopilot is based on the concepts of airplanes, like we spoke about in 2 episodes ago.
We actually scooped this.
We did scoop it a little bit, and
I thought it was interesting how he actually laid out a metric for this idea of it being in beta too. Mm-hmm. That he said that once it gets to the point where it's going to be 10x again, it's going to be 10 times safer than the U.S. vehicle average, the beta label will be removed.
And also interesting that they're using the U.S. average because the international average is much lower. That would be an easier standard, or the worldwide blended average, but they're using U.S., which is a higher standard. U.S. deaths per mile are much lower than U.S. International deaths. So that's a higher standard than the worldwide one.
I wonder how much of that is due to crash safety versus number of accidents. Like, is it the same number of accidents, but the safety regulations around here mean that less people die during these accidents?
I would bet, and I also think it has to do with the age of the fleet. The U.S. fleet is pretty new relative to other countries where they tend to get used cars from, many of them are used cars from the U.S. as a bigger percentage of their fleet, especially more developing countries. So,
and 2-stroke scooters. So,
yeah, definitely less protected vehicles, less safety features. So, I think they see it as a safety feature for sure.
All right. So part 3 or bullet point 3 was autopilot. How about 4? That's
sharing. So this is the most not ready, I would say, but also something that has been asked about on earnings conference calls. And so at one point, so this one's for about sharing.
Right. This was enable your car to make money for you when you aren't using it, was specifically what he summarized it as.
Right. And B, as a result of the inverse of that, as a consumer, click a button in your Tesla app and get a car to you that isn't the one that you own or have any ownership of a Tesla car. And,
so it's sort of 2 parts, right? There's the idea of having a Tesla shared fleet, which is essentially really sounded like a shot across the bow of Uber. And
Absolutely.
then also this idea of being able to take your car and then let it run around, which there's a little company here in San Francisco called Get Around, which does something like that, where you can actually rent out your vehicle, your personal vehicle when you're not using it. So something like that.
Yeah, and the interesting piece here was, as I was mentioning, that analysts have asked Elon what he thought about car sharing and if Tesla had plans for it on a conference call in the past. And his answer, he paused, and then he said, "I don't think it'd be wise to talk about that yet." Something to that effect of not gonna get into that, which is basically a non-answer denial kind of. I can't tell you what I'm working on because then I would have to kill you kind of answer. So I think there were folks who certainly expected that Tesla might do something here. So I think it's really great that they're talking about it in this master plan and that it's sort of one of the big pillars. I think there was a possibility that it was just going to be like the Get Around type service where it's like available if you wanted to let your car be used by other members of the community or other people, but not a important part of the business. But this also ties into why they don't want to necessarily need to make cheaper cars, because this is predicated on self-driving. So we won't see sharing until true self-driving. So unlike the first master plan where he sequenced it in serial order, this one is more temporally jumbled. But the sharing point does start off by talking about it. When true self-driving is approved by regulators, it means you could summon your Tesla from anywhere. And so then you could add your Tesla to a shared fleet. So this certainly won't be happening for years.
Right.
So this will be in the back half, I'd expect, of this 10-year. If he's expecting it to be a 10-year plan, this would be in the back half because we need self-driving. And then I think this one also I think makes the most sense on paper and gets to the question of, well, if everyone has if all cars are self-driving, why do you need to own a car? And what is the role of car manufacturers in transportation if it becomes a software layer of picking, Uber and Lyft? Like, who cares what car you have? Who cares who makes the car if all you need is to get from point A to point B and you don't own the car, like we talked about, like airplanes. You don't really care if you get on Airbus or Boeing 737. It sounds like they believe that car ownership will still be a meaningful part for the next decade, 20 years, but that with some cars having full autonomy, you will be able to allow them to be part of this self-sharing fleet and actually monetize it, make money off of the time when your car isn't being used. One assumption there is that people would do that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one to me. I don't necessarily understand that Venn diagram where if people are paying for their own vehicles because they want their own vehicle, and then there are another subset of people who don't want to own a vehicle and they just want to like get from point A to point B. Is there actually an overlap there where I actually want to own my own vehicle, but then I'm comfortable with whoever in the world just like riding in it all day long while I'm at work? That I'm not sure that that's a very large overlap.
I think the telling thing in their description, or at least in his, is that he says significantly offsetting and at times potentially exceeding the monthly loan or lease cost. So if you're someone coming in and dropping cash for your car, probably don't need to do car sharing. You don't have a problem with paying for your car. But implicit in saying a monthly loan or lease is implying a person who is going to be thinking about their car not necessarily as a completely low part of their expense ratio for their income, but something where they can't afford the full car, like most people, and they're actually using a loan or a lease to afford it. And that, if you put your car in for a day, you might get $100, $200 or $50 or $20 or whatever it ends up being. And that would make a difference for you if you have a $300 or $400 lease payment or a loan. So I think that the only scenario there is not many people who own them today, but a lot of the people who might be buying a Model 3 or who would need to afford only a $200 a month payment, but could upgrade to a $400 Model 3 and lease it out or loan it out, half the time when they're at work and they don't mind someone being in their car because they get to drive a nicer car on their own. But then why don't you just use why do you want your own car? Because you're not, then you should just be a member of the fleet.
Yeah, as soon as
So-
you're comfortable with strangers being in the vehicle, then why would you bother owning the vehicle? That doesn't actually make sense, and that feels like some sort of temporary Band-Aid type thing to make people feel more comfortable from this like current model that we're in, where everyone owns their own vehicle, to this model we're going towards, which is more of a fleet transportation service. So I don't know. That's my speculation. It seems weird.
Well, it sounds like they already expect to have to offset that, because they said in certain cities and places where where demand outstrips supply, they will add Teslas into the fleet that are owned by Tesla. So I think because they already anticipate needing to do that, they have to be planning for an eventual future where that ratio is 100% Tesla fleet, and maybe 95% Tesla fleet and 5% self-owned. So certainly having the capability of those being owned by Tesla or some other company, a la, some private equity firm or venture firm that wants to just own some of the cars and make money off them, or I could certainly see people doing it as an investment the same way you would have a rental property. Maybe it starts to make sense to have a car as a rental property, and you have cash and you can buy a car and put it into the fleet. I don't know what Tesla's take will be, and if it will be too much to make it really economically viable to run as a business and pay for the car, but we'll see. I mean, this one's really far away, but I think the ambition of that is great, and certainly we've seen folks like GM invest in Lyft, and try and be prepared for this sort of more car sharing future. BMW having their own car sharing, Audi having their own car sharing. And it sounds like Tesla isn't going to do anything until they're fully self-driving, which I think makes a lot of sense, since there are people like GetAround and others who are trying to do it today. And
You can actually rent a Model S on GetAround too. There are a few, at least in Silicon Valley. There are a few here where you can zip around in a Model S on the weekend if you'd like.
Yep, and it's cheaper than doing it from Hertz in their like luxury car system. So that's how I plan to try Model S again, is not just doing a test drive, but renting it for a day or two.
Cool. All right.
So yeah, I guess in closing, that's the end of the core pieces. How does this match up with what you were expecting, and how do you feel it sort of gravitas is compared to the first one?
I mean, nothing seems crazy in it. It seems like it's pretty much logical extensions of stuff they've been doing. I agree that the semi sounds a little bit out there. The bus, I mean, I'm not really sure what the difference between an actual bus vehicle would be versus a maybe municipality owned fleet of small Teslas that are zipping around with their share service. So I think there's some conflict there between bullet points 2 and 4, where, I mean, maybe that's actually what it is, and maybe they are the same thing. But yeah, it seems interesting. I mean, I think bullet point 1 or part 1 or section 1, whatever we want to call it, is I mean, obviously is not surprising, since they've already been talking about merging or acquiring Solar City. And I think it's sensible. I'll say that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's what I was struck by too, is that it sounds like, when you look at all 4 of them, they're already doing 3 of them. They're already doing things with solar and battery packs for homes. So that's already in the works. They're already in the works with the Model 3 and Y, like SUV. They've already sort of talked about that. And the pickup truck, we know that Elon was curious about those. So that's already sort of been happening. I think that the autonomy is already clearly in the works with autopilot, and you can imagine how that's going to end up. And Elon already talks about when full autonomy will happen in many interviews. So enabling your car to make money when you aren't using it, the last one, is really the only one that hasn't been even really talked about, except for the non-answer on one of the conference calls. So I feel like the first master plan, people only really knew about the Roadster. Tesla was a startup that was kind of crazy and totally out there, and no one had any expectation for it. And like Elon Musk was just coming off of PayPal and was not the same level of celebrity and adoration for him as he does have now. So I think the stakes and like the level of complexity for what would need to come next obviously was risen. So I feel like this is pretty good. I think it's pretty predictable. I think that I think the time horizon on it seems about right for something like another decade. And I think that if they do accomplish all of these things, they will certainly be a much more important company than they are today. So it's not like building insignificant or only sort of sub-revision products. It definitely has... if they do actually accomplish all these things, they will be a very different kind of company than they are now. So I think that it definitely passes the sniff test of like, okay, Roadster to Model 3 is a big change in company, but really only the same product. This is diversifying product line, diversifying the business types, and being in a world where we're not driving our cars anymore and saying that's something we're driving towards very quickly is pretty interesting. So I'm really happy with it. And I think the biggest thing that this does is it allows Tesla to keep talking about what they're going to work on and what they're working on, because they don't have these products yet. Many of these things are not going to cannibalize their existing sales. So it allows them to go out and recruit. It allows them to talk about their plan publicly and just continue to build excitement around the company and working there and attracting great talent who, are working in the semi-truck industry or working at Uber and Lyft and should now come over to Tesla and help build that team. Or everyone who wants to do autonomy can really know for sure that Tesla has that ambition and they've said it publicly. So I think it really is sort of putting a stake in the ground that allows them to rally attention and press and employees and investors around what we're going to go do. And sort of sets a timeline of we this is what we're going to go do in the next 10 years, and it still seems pretty aggressive. So I'm excited to see it. Obviously, the first part of it is getting Model 3 out there, and then they can really start on the new stuff. So,
well, getting Model 3 out and then ramping up scaling their production for the ensuing demand of the Model 3 too.
Yeah, I feel like the one that will be the biggest impact from what they are today and most impactful is going to be the factory stuff, because that's still the biggest concern is, can they do that? And if they can really change the dynamics of the manufacturing process, that's going to be pretty important to being able to roll out all these other vehicles at the speed they want. I think the technical challenges of the autopilot and self-driving, I think that technology is being advanced by a lot of folks, but I don't know that many people who are really trying to push the boundary of car manufacturing besides BMW and some of their i3 stuff, but it's super low volume. So anyways, would love to hear everyone's thoughts on what they think the implications are for this, and in light of this, what they would love to hear us talk about in the future.
Yeah.
I think we got some new episodes to talk about as a result of this. So where can they let us know about all that stuff, Mike?
Oh, and before we do that too, I just remembered we forgot to actually announce what we were drinking tonight too.
Oh, right.
From my end here, I am drinking a Martinez because I couldn't come up with anything related in the amount of time I had. How about you?
I am drinking some white wine.
All right. Any specific variety or just a white table wine?
It's just a white table wine from Whole Foods.
All right. All right, then.
Nothing special. I apologize.
If you'd like to suggest things for Caleb to drink or different wines for him to try, you can hit us up at our subreddit at r/The Tesla Show, or tweet at us on Twitter at The Tesla Show, or visit our shiny website at theteslashow.com. That's just theteslashow.com, not at theteslashow.com.
That's right. All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon then, Mike, and we'll have another episode shortly.
All right.